Great. Hey, everyone. Sorry, I'm experiencing some internet instability issues, but I'll do the best I can. So, Lori, you shared the HDF forum for HSDS.
Yeah, so hopefully you can see it, or someone else could give a thumbs up to show they see it, but I've got the HSDS forum open. So if there was a particular thread you wanted me to open, I can show that.
Yep. I thought, how much is too much for the NREL API? So this person is trying to use this NREL SUP 3R, but having no luck. So let me just provide some background. NREL, the National Renewable Energy Lab, hosts an HSDS instance. And through that, you can access these terabytes of data about wind, waves, solar radiation, etc. To use their web API, you need to get an API key. And NREL limits how many requests each user can make for a given API key. And this user is getting some data back, but not the bulk of it. And NREL suggests that in this case, they set up their own HSDS server. And that's okay, except this gentleman is on Windows, and the setup guide NREL provides only refers to Linux. Also, he's a little worried maybe that setting up a server is a lot of effort to configure and such. But actually, a few things is you don't really need to run a server like in Docker or Kubernetes to run HSDS. You can just run on the command line. So for Mac or Linux, you do this /run all.sh -- no Docker, TCP. So summarize, you can run HSDS on the command line on Linux or Mac using run all.sh, and on Windows doing run all.bat. So with that, you should be up and running. Yeah, so you can read this forum post for more detail, but that's the gist of it. All right. So moving on to the next post, this person is trying to contact HSDS API.href.org and gets a 503 service unavailable error. So this is actually kind of related to the previous post. So for a long time, we've had HDF Lab. HDF Lab is a Jupyter Hub, Jupyter Lab setup that runs on AWS and lets you connect to it and access HSDS and run any kind of Python scripts you want, other than Bitcoin mining. It seems though that in the current environment, the level of effort to maintain HDF Lab isn't really worth it, considering that there are a bunch of free alternative Jupyter Lab setups you can use. For example, AWS SageMaker provides a similar Jupyter Lab environment. Or you can just run, like we discussed in this last forum post, you can run HSDS just on the command line on your desktop. So I think that should be a reasonable alternative for people who need the functionality they're getting in HDF Lab. This particular case, he was trying to access the endpoint. So HDF Lab had the Jupyter Hub endpoint, which you would connect to sign on Jupyter Hub, and also have an HSDS endpoint, which you could access externally. And so maybe some people would use HSDS as a external web service without actually signing in to HDF Lab. Though we did actually encourage that. So with Jupyter Lab going down, also this HSDS HDF Lab endpoint will be going down as well. But like I said, you can easily set up your own HSDS either with Docker or Kubernetes or on the command line. Next, let's look at how to add data in Azure storage containers to HSDS server. So Brendan says they deployed HSDS server on Azure using Docker, following the docs. And the wrinkle is that, again, he wants, sorry, I was saying you can't use your HSDS instance to talk to both the Azure cloud storage and AWS S3. So he was trying to do an HS load of the NREL HSDS file, but it's rather complicated, right? For one, his Azure instance won't be set up to talk to S3. For another, these files are quite large, multi-terabytes, and it would be problematic to copy the entire data and not run into this quota limit that I talked about earlier. That said, there's some possibility that NREL will be providing data sets on Azure directly. So that may be a path forward. We'll provide updates as that moves along. And next, we have alternative bearer token generation. So again, some background. In HSDS, you have several ways to set up authentication. Authentication is when you make requests, having the server verify your identity. The simplest and maybe least secure is to set up a set of usernames and passwords that's managed by the server. And when you connect to HSDS, the username password gets encoded into the HTTP header, is decoded by HSDS, and if it matches its own copy of the username passwords, then that request is authenticated. Not necessarily the same as authorized, because after it's authenticated, you still have to have permissions to do whatever action you want to do. For example, read from a domain or delete a file, etc. So, but other than that, there are different ways of using like a third-party authentication. So when you say, for example, use Azure Active Directory, your username is validated by Azure, and the Azure Active Directory sends back a token that you then send to HSDS. HSDS can validate that token without ever having to learn your username and password. So that works pretty well. In this case, this user is on a HPC system, and he's inquiring, can he use a similar authentication token with HSDS? And the answer is, no, we don't support that out of the box, but the interface for authentication in HSDS is quite extensible, and it's gone through several rounds of extensions already. And it should be feasible to modify the code to support this means of authentication. And that said, let me add that we're very happy for people, if they have some feature or fix they would like in HSDS, to go ahead and submit a pull request, and we'll be happy to review that and integrate it in with the mainland code branch. All right. So next, let's switch over to the vols and VFDs forum. And someone was asking, Jan William Bicklund was asking, they have a library that they wrote on top of HDF 5. They've tried out using the ROS3 VFD, and it works okay, but now they are looking to maybe step up and use HSDS. Yeah, the documentation needs to be updated a bit. And then there were some questions about functionality in the vol connector. So the REST vol, let me say it this way. There are features that are needed by the REST vol that HSDS doesn't support. And there are also features that HSDS does support that are not yet supported by the REST vol. But the set's fairly small, and we're making progress to narrow the gap week by week. So few of these were, if you go down, he was asking about H5D set extent, H5O copy, H5L move, and H5D gets. For increasing the dimensions of a data set, but it doesn't support reducing the dimensions. So that's a feature we would need to add to HSDS, and I created an issue for that today. The other one is called H5O copy. So this API function copies an object like a group or a data set or let's see, where was I? The reason it wasn't supported before is because if you imagine you have a data set that's maybe several gigabytes of data, it could take quite some time to copy all that data. And if that request is happening through an HTTP request, your client may time out before the server ever completed that operation. But yet there are ways around that, and we can explore those. The other two, H5L link move, H5L move, that just renames a link. And I think that doesn't need any HSDS updates that can be supported just in the REST file. Similarly, for H5D get storage size, this reports storage used in terms of allocated chunks and so on. And that actually is supported in the server. We just haven't made the proper connection with the REST file yet. Matt, anything you'd like to add on these topics?
No, I think you just about covered it.
All right, okay. Anyway, really working hard to improve the REST file. So keep on sending in issues and posting the forum, and really happy to see the involvement here. Okay, I think that covers it for the recent forum post. Anyone else have questions or anything they'd like to talk about? Lori, you want to talk about the HUG event?
Sure. Yep, I'm ready. So just to plug again for the HDF user group meeting that's happening next week, August 16th through 18th in Columbus, Ohio. For this reason, we are canceling next week's Call the Doctor, which would be Alexander's session usually. So we're just canceling it for next Tuesday, but we'll be on again the following week. You can still register to attend if you're in the area of Columbus. You can register in person or just do it online. Virtual registration is still available. We also have the agenda posted. You might want to take a look at that. There's lots of great stuff there. As we always do, we will post our recordings publicly on YouTube. You can just get to them faster if you happen to be a registered attendee. The URL, I put it in the chat and it's in the description for the recording, but it's hdfgroup.org/hug/hug23 will get you to the start of the information on the HUG event. But we'd love to see as many people there as we can. Should be a great event. That is all that I have. Any other questions? So we will all reconvene on August 22nd. Will be our next Call the Doctor with Scott, who is our HPC and Fortran person. Right. Thank you, everyone, and continue asking questions on the forum like John said. And we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Bye all.
Bye, everyone.